Chapter 54 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Harris. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. Chapter 54. Mutual Discomfiture. It must not be supposed that I was altogether so thick-headed as Jeremy would have made me out. But it is part of my character that I like other people to think me slow, and to labor hard to enlighten me, while all the time I can say to myself, "This man is shallower than I am. It is pleasant to see his shoals come up while he is sounding mine so." Not that I would so behave, God forbid, with anybody, be it man or woman, who in simple heart approached me, with no gauge of intellect. But when the upper hand is taken, upon the faith of one's patience, by a man of even smaller wits, not that Jeremy was that, neither could he have lived to be thought so, why, it naturally happens that we knuckle under with an ounce of indignation. Jeremy's tale would have moved me greatly both with sorrow and anger, even without my guess at first, and now my firm belief, that the child of those unlucky parents was indeed my Lorna. And as I thought of the lady's troubles, and her faith in Providence, and her cruel childless death, and then imagined how my darling would be overcome to hear it, you may well believe that my quick replies to Jeremy Stickle's banter were but as the flourish of a drum to cover the sounds of pain. For when he described the heavy coach and the persons in and upon it, and the breaking down at Dulverton, and the place of their destination, as well as the time and the weather and the season of the year, my heart began to burn within me, and my mind replaced the pictures, first of the foreign lady's maid by the pump caressing me, and then of the coach struggling up the hill, and the beautiful dame, and the fine little boy with the white cockade in his hat, but most of all the little girl, dark-haired and very lovely, and having even in those days the rich soft look of Lorna. But when he spoke of the necklace thrown over the head of the little maiden, and of her disappearance, before my eyes arose at once the flashing of the beacon fire, the lonely moors embrowned with the light, the tramp of the outlaw cavalcade, and the helpless child head downward, lying across the robber's saddle-bow. Then I remembered my own mad shout of boyish indignation, and marveled at the strange long way by which the events of life come round. And while I thought of my own return, and childish attempt to hide myself from sorrow in the saw-pit, and the agony of my mother's tears, it did not fail to strike me as a thing of omen, that the self-same day should be, both to my darling and myself, the blackest and most miserable of all youthful days. The King's Commissioner thought it wise, for some good reason of his own, to conceal from me, for the present, the name of the poor lady supposed to be Lorna's mother; and knowing that I could easily now discover it, without him, I let that question abide a while. Indeed, I was half afraid to hear it, remembering that the nobler and the wealthier she proved to be, the smaller was my chance of winning such a wife for plain John Ridd. Not that she would give me up, that I never dreamed of; but that others would interfere, or indeed I myself might find it only honest to relinquish her. That last thought was a dreadful blow, and took my breath away from me. Jeremy Stickles was quite decided, and of course the discovery being his, he had a right to be so, that not a word of all these things must be imparted to Lorna herself, or even to my mother, or any one whatever. "Keep it tight as wax, my lad," he cried, with a wink of great expression. "This belongs to me, mind, and the credit, and the premium, and the right of discount are altogether mine. It would have taken you 50 years to put two and two together so, as I did, like a clap of thunder. Ah, God has given some men brains, and others have good farms and money, and a certain skill in the lower beasts. Each must use his special talent. You work your farm, I work my brains. In the end, my lad, I shall beat you." "Then, Jeremy, what a fool you must be, if you cudgel your brains to make money of this, to open the barn door to me, and show me all your threshing." "Not a whit, my son; quite the opposite. Two men always thresh better than one. And here I have you bound to use your flail, 1-2, with mine, and yet in strictest honour bound not to bushel up till I tell you. But, said I, being much amused by a Londoner's brave yet uncertain use of simplest rural metaphors, for he had wholly forgotten the winnowing, surely if I bushel up, even when you tell me, I must take half measure. So you shall, my boy, he answered, if we can only cheat those confounded knaves of equity. You shall take the beauty, my son, and the elegance, and the love, and all that. And, my boy, I will take the money. This he said in a way so dry and yet so richly unctuous, that being gifted somehow by God with a kind of sense of queerness, I fell back in my chair and laughed, though the underside of my laugh was tears. Now, Jeremy, how if I refuse to keep this half as tight as wax? You bound me to no such partnership before you told the story, and I am not sure by any means of your right to do so afterwards. Tush, he replied, I know you too well to look for meanness in you. If from pure good will, John Ridd, and anxiety to relieve you, I made no condition precedent, you are not the man to take advantage, as a lawyer might. I do not even want your promise. As sure as I hold this glass, and drink your health and love in another drop, forced on me by pathetic words, so surely will you be bound to me until I do release you. Tush, I know men well by this time. A mere look of trust from one is worth another's 10,000 oaths. Jeremy, you are right, I answered, at least as regards the issue. Although perhaps you were not right in leading me into a bargain like this, without my own consent or knowledge. But supposing that we should both be shot in this grand attack on the valley, for I mean to go with you now, heart and soul, is Lorna to remain untold of that which changes all her life? Both shot, cried Jeremy Stickles. My goodness, boy, talk not like that. And those Doones are cursed good shots, too. Nay, nay, the yellows shall go in front. We attack on the Somerset side, I think. I from a hill will reconnoitre, as behoves a general. You shall stick behind a tree, if we can only find one big enough to hide you. You and I to be shot, John Ridd, with all this inferior food for powder anxious to be devoured? I laughed, for I knew his cool hardihood and never flinching courage, and sooth to say no coward would have dared to talk like that. But when one comes to think of it, he continued, smiling at himself, some provision should be made for even that unpleasant chance. I will leave the whole in writing, with orders to be opened, etc., etc. Now no more of that, my boy. A cigarro after schnapps, and go to meet my yellow boys. His yellow boys, as he called the Somersetshire trained bands, were even now coming down the valley from the London road, as every one since I went up to town, grandly entitled the lane to the moors. There was one good point about these men, that having no discipline at all, they made pretence to none whatever. Nay, rather they ridiculed the thing, as below men of any spirit. On the other hand, Master Stickles' troopers look down on these native fellows from a height which I hope they may never tumble, for it would break the necks of all of them. Now these fine natives came along, singing, for their very lives, a song the like of which set down here would oust my book from modest people, and make everybody say, this man never can have loved Lorna. Therefore the less of that the better, only I thought, what a difference from the goodly psalms of the alehouse. Having finished their canticle, which contained more mirth than melody, they drew themselves up, in a sort of way supposed by them to be military, each man with heel and elbow stuck into those of his neighbour, and saluted the King's Commissioner. "Why, where are your officers?" asked Master Stickles. "How is it that you have no officers?" Upon this there arose a general grin, and a knowing look passed along their faces, even up to the man by the gate-post. "Are you going to tell me or not," said Jeremy, "what is become of your officers?" "Plaise, sir," said one little fellow at last, being nodded at by the rest to speak, in right of his known